Dr. Oliver, as many of you know, especially our American friends, was one of the original founders of the John Birch Society, and for many years was a feature writer for American Opinion magazine. As a matter of fact, he was their ace reviewer, and many of us used to read those reviews very religiously. After World War II, I might say at the present time, Dr. Oliver is professor of classics at the University of Illinois. And after World War II, he was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, and in 1953-54 studied in Europe on a Fulbright Research Fellowship. A scholar of international repute, Dr. Oliver is a member of no less than 14 learned societies. And today he's widely recognized as one of America's leading authorities on Latin America. During World War II, he was director of research in a secret agency of the United States War Department. And he's today one of America's outstanding authorities on international communism with respect to the race question. Some of you are familiar with his tremendous book, Conspiracy or Degeneracy. We have a supply up here at the front table. We were extremely fortunate to be able to induce Dr. Oliver to come up and participate in this seminar. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome Dr. Oliver and Mrs. Oliver, who is with the doctor on his visit, to welcome them to Toronto and to introduce Dr. Oliver to this audience. Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gostick. Ladies and gentlemen, some years ago, a young corporation executive got married. And in the natural course of human events, the young couple had a son. While he was still a toddler, the boy saw a dog chase a cat. The next time the boy saw a cat, he dashed at it on hands and knees and gave a convincing imitation of a canine bark. His parents, naturally, thought that very, very cute. The little boy thereafter went through the performance whenever he was in a home in which there was a cat. Now, that was cute and funny for a time, but after a few years it became rather embarrassing. And the lad either could not or would not heed parental pleas to desist. Whenever he saw a cat, whatever the time, the place, or the company, down he went on his knees and rushed at it, barking. Now, back in the horse and buggy days, that would have been no problem. But in our more enlightened age, the psychologists have taught us that children must not be punished or corrected. A whipping? Ach, that gives traumas in the mind, no? So the parents took him to the local mind shrinker, who charged them $50 a visit for a year, and then referred them to a greater psychiatrist in Chicago, who charged them $100 a visit for 6 months, and then referred them to a yet greater witch doctor in New York, who charged them $200 a visit for 3 months, and finally he recommended them to the very greatest man in the whole profession, the greatest psychiatrist in the whole world, Dr. Teufelsdruck, a savant so illustrious that he lived on his estate in Westchester County, where only the elite could aspire to the privilege of being admitted to his presence. The boy's mother, however, found a hotel in the vicinity, and and took him to Dr. Teufelsdruck's mansion, where Dr. Teufelsdruck's nurse took charge of him and promised that the great man would see him soon. But no sooner had the mother returned to her hotel room than the telephone rang. It was Dr. Teufelsdruck's nurse, who said excitedly, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, please come and get your little boy right away." "What's the matter?" said the alarmed mother. "Is he ill?" "No," said the nurse, "but he has treed Dr. Teufelsdruck. And oh, Mrs. Smith, please hurry. It just breaks my heart to see Dr. Teufelsdruck up in that tree and so piteously meowing for help." Mr. Gostick has asked me, ladies and gentlemen, to discuss with you the race war that is now underway in the United States. My function here certainly is not to deliver an oration weighted with rhetoric and emotional exhortation, nor is it to urge or recommend to you any course of action. You here in Canada have enough troubles of your own, and you are likely to have still more in the near future. I shall merely remind you that the white Occidental populations of Canada and the United States, although divided by government and to some slight extent by historical development and tradition, are peoples of the same origin, belonging to the same race, and sharing the same Christian civilization of the West, and that they have a common cause, because they both belong to the world's most hated and despised minority. That, far more than our geographical contiguity, means that we have a common destiny. Although our enemies, adapting their methods to the differences in the composition of our populations and the structure of our economy, are attacking us in ways that superficially differ, the fact that you and we are of the same race means that you and we shall inevitably, in the long run, have a common fate, whatever that may be. As I see it, therefore, my function today is to give you, as objectively and dispassionately as I can, an estimate of the present plight of the United States with particular reference to the race war. Now, it would profit us little to recite either general statistics or typical details concerning the riots and small-scale insurrections that our federal government has incited and financed in more than 200 of our cities during the past 4 years. It would do little good to estimate how many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property the savages have destroyed, how many policemen they have killed, crippled, or wounded, how many white women they have raped or mutilated or murdered, and how many other crimes they have committed with the encouragement and under the protection of our federal government and the more brazenly corrupt of our local governments. An account of some specific and particularly noteworthy atrocities might be shocking and thrilling, unless they've already come to seem commonplace, but it would not be very profitable for us to review them here, for the savages have committed no crimes that a reasonable man could not have predicted and anticipated 10 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, merely on the basis of his knowledge of the nature and character of their race and of their behavior, both in their native habitat and in places such as Hispaniola, where they had already been incited to hatred of the white man and of the civilization that the white man created. Harrowing and gruesome as so many of the atrocities are, they are really no more significant than what happens when you drop a lighted match into a barrel of gasoline. Everybody, except perhaps the feeble-minded, knows precisely what happens when you drop the match in the gasoline. And also everybody, unless extremely ignorant, should know precisely what Congoids do when they revert to the savagery that is their natural state, and from which they can emerge only so long as they are under the tutelage and discipline of a civilized race. I need not describe the riots and insurrections that have taken place from 1964 to the present, and that are still occurring this summer. occurring despite the energetic and almost desperate efforts of the administration in Washington to postpone really sensational uprisings until after the elections in November. And that, in practical terms, means until next summer. For it is also characteristic of the Congoids that even their most enthusiastic apostles of social justice and civil rights don't like to burn and kill in bad weather, no matter how well they're paid for it. Here in Canada, you have undoubtedly learned something about the riots from your own press. You see, it is not feasible for the press entirely to suppress such news. Canadians do visit the United States, and most of them, I'm sure, are not sufficiently progressive to enjoy the sights that they might chance to see in Detroit, or Cleveland, or Newark, or Los Angeles, or Peoria, or almost any city in the northern part of the United States. Moreover, some of you have undoubtedly friends or relatives in those cities, and so long as you are permitted to use the mails and the telephone, it would be absurd to pretend that all is serene and lovely south of the border. The best that your press can do, therefore, is to minimize the outbreaks that are so noteworthy that some mention of them must be made, and either not report crimes or disguise them by concealing the race of the criminals, and then fill up the rest of their column with the usual hogwash about ghettos and the underprivileged, and suggest that the whole responsibility and guilt falls on the wicked white Americans who were so bigoted and selfish that they neglect their Christian duty to supply the noble blacks with enough Cadillacs, white whores, narcotics, incendiary bombs, and automatic rifles to keep them amused and happy. But if you have learned the art of reading lie papers and extrapolating from what they do report, you probably have a fairly good idea of what happens during the riots in this opening phase of the race war. In this first phase, according to the strategic plan drawn up long ago, the tactical objective is to terrorize and either kill, cow, or convert the very large part of our Negro population who would prefer to retain their carefree comforts rather than kill and loot. They are chiefly the older people who grew up when we still maintained a minimum of civilized order. Now, such conversions naturally increase geometrically, not only through terrorism and contagion of mass violence, but also as the domesticated Negroes reluctantly learn to despise us for our craven refusal to maintain order and protect ourselves and them. And as they behold with contempt the antics of white degenerates, especially the young punks and sluts that we hatch in our colleges and let loose on our streets to display their irrationality, their personal filth, and their conscious degradation that is so great that they mix, sexually and otherwise, with the blacks. But even with the intimidation